Welcome to a financial planning podcast with a down-to-earth vibe. Sasquatch listens while sweating it out in his sauna. This is Through the Pines. On this episode, we explore financial goal setting for the new year. So how to set financial goals. I think this is a good idea. How to track your financials and creating a budget, breaking free, finally becoming financially independent, growing your wealth, protecting your assets. So we cover these topics on this episode of Through the Pines. Joining us, our advisors for this episode, Plan with Baxter. We have Rex. He could be anywhere in the world right now because he's dialing in via the internet. So
just call me Carmen Sandiego.
Carmen Sandiego, which I don't think you're in San Diego, but could be.
Could be.
And then in studio, we have Brandon Smith with Plan with Baxter, planwithbaxter.com. So if you would like to ask questions or find out more about these advisors, go to planwithbaxter.com. They do know what they're doing. They won the 2024 Forbes Best in State Wealth Management Team for Utah's second year, twice in a row.
Yeah, back to back.
Back to back. Ever been done before?
Not by us. That's the first time we've won it back to back.
Fair enough. Also, received the Advisor Hub, fastest growing advisors to watch under $1 billion, and the receivers of the Ameriprise Client Experience Award, so they know what they are doing. Again, Baxter, Smith and Associates. You can reach them at planwithbaxter.com. Let's plan in. So it's a new year. We have goals. It's a good time to, a lot of times, they're money goals, but a lot of time they're health goals. And I'm assuming it's like the same sort of tactics. I don't know. Maybe you can fill me in on this, but when you chat with clients of yours, Plan with Baxter people, how do you go about setting financial goals? Because it's got to be different for everyone. So how do you even start the process, Brandon?
For me, the before we start setting goals, I need to know where you are.
Yeah.
And that is, I can't believe how often that gets skipped. But until I know where you're at, then nothing else can start. And so that's where that when we meet with clients, we'll go through that and we'll back into their cash flows and say, how much do you make? How much are we saving? How much is going to taxes? How much is going towards mortgage? Other things like that. We can back that out, figure out exactly where you are today, and then project that into the future and figure out, hey, are you on track? Are you not on track? And then from there, we have a baseline. Mm-hmm. And I always, with clients, especially younger clients, that still have a decade or two before retirement, I like to establish the baseline of what do we need to do to continue life as you know it today, right? We don't want you to hit retirement and have your lifestyle take a hit. What does it take to just hit the maintain button, right? Mm-hmm. Adjusted for inflation, of course. And then from there, then you start setting goals, right? That's where the goals happen. Are we there yet? If we are, then we've got some extra cash flow. Where do we put that? Do we put that into increasing lifestyle today? Do we increase lifestyle in retirement? Or do we kind of blend that a little bit? And that's where the goal setting starts. But until you know where you're at today, I don't think you can really start.
Okay. So then, Rex, what about goal setting for those who are, say, independently wealthy?
Well, I think everybody has goals, right? Whether you're independently wealthy or not. I mean, you still have things that you're trying to accomplish in life, financially or otherwise. And so the goals might just be different, but they still have goals, whether it's staying independently wealthy, right? And sometimes that's the goal. But sometimes it's, I want to be able to fund a business, or I want to be able to support those around me and make it so that they're not dependent on me, but they're independently wealthy at some point. And so, I don't think your net worth determines whether you're going to have goals. I think everybody has goals, and just some have a more difficult time articulating them and spelling them out. And that's where we help, right? Is we figure out where you're at today, and then we help you articulate and help you set those goals and figure out what they are and why they're important to you.
So if someone comes to you, Rex, and says, I want to save more, that's not a specific goal. So do you just start with specifics right off the bat?
Yeah, I mean, we start asking questions like why, right? What are you trying to do? You want to save more for retirement? You want to save more for a house? You want to save more for, for a vacation next year? What's our time frame? And so we get into, most people have heard of SMART goals, right? And so once we figure out where you're at, like Brandon said, then we start breaking the goals down into smart or smarter goals that are specific. And so we need to know exactly what it is. It's got to be meaningful to you. As far as that's concerned, it's got to be achievable, relevant, time bound, right? It's got to have a time measurement to it. And then if it's smarter, you evaluate and readjust is kind of the ER on the end. So I think it's important to go through that entire process.
How do you use that in your everyday work, Rex? Because it sounds like
So
you have this memorized. So I'm assuming you do this like every day. Do you
every
read your
day,
goals? Yeah. Do you read your goals every day? What's the best way to do this?
yeah. So like, let's talk about our team, right? Our team has goals, right? And so, we have a business plan, we have goals that we're trying to achieve. And so just this morning, right, we went through our goals this morning and how we did over the last week.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all measurable, right? They're all time bound, they're all relevant, they're all, all those
They're
things.
all getting fired.
Yeah, well, yeah,
No,
I frequently fire my team if it doesn't happen once or twice a week,
yeah,
then it's
your
just not a
team.
good
That's
week,
like coaches in the NFL. Just cycle them through. Cycle them through.
Oh,
Oh my
they're rehired like
God.
within moments, so
Oh yeah, no, totally kidding.
yeah.
So that's good. That's a one way to keep them accountable. But when it comes to your own financials, we don't necessarily have that coach. We don't have that boss or whoever helping us. That's where you come in, right? As a financial planner, a financial advisor. And how do you keep people? First of all, they got to figure out what their goals are, and then how do you keep them on track?
How do you keep them accountable towards
Mhm.
those goals?
Yep.
So I think part of that is breaking them down into smaller goals, right? Is somebody says, hey, look, I want to be able to live on, and I'll throw out random numbers, right? $100,000 a year when I'm 60, in today's dollars, right? So maybe that's 150 by the time you adjust for inflation, depending upon how old they are. And that's great. And so in order to do that, we need to be saving X amount into your 401k plan. We need to be targeting a 6% rate of return over time, whatever that is. And so we kind of break that down into the different pieces. And then when we meet with them, whether it's once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year on those frequencies, we're checking and saying, okay, did you save, have you been saving $500 a month? Have you been saving $2,000 a month? Have we been averaging over the last 3 or 5 or 10 years that 6%? Because every year it may be up or down, but are we still trending towards that long-term target rate of return? And so it's breaking down the bigger goals down into smaller steps, right? It's the same way you eat an elephant, right? A bite at a time. And that's the exact same thing that we're doing with goals, a bite at a time.
Never actually had elephant, but that
Me
sounds like
neither.
a good idea. Yeah.
Have you had
And-
alligator? We had alligator last year.
oh, I didn't say alligator, but yeah,
Oh,
alligator's good.
yeah, yeah.
Fried,
Chewy.
fried. Yeah, chewy. Brandon.
Yeah, so I've the human mind, I don't think, is built to understand big numbers, right? You say
Mm.
200,000, 300,000, 400,000, like a million, 2 million, 3 million. People don't understand what that means most times. And so one of the cool parts of our job is helping people understand where they're at so that they then can make and dream, right? I think a lot of people are afraid to set, lofty goals because they're not sure what that even means and how they can accomplish it. I think most of us can relate and set a goal as far as like a vacation or a really, a cabin or a nicer house or a nice car. I mean, those things we can visualize, but the financials behind it are a little bit more difficult.
Mm.
And so that's where, with clients, a lot of times, clients, I'll see them and they're not spending enough money, which is fine. If you don't want to spend money, that's great. I'm not going to like force you. However, if you're not spending money, I want, and you could be, I want you to understand and make sure that's a conscious goal, right? Is our goal just to amass wealth to pass on to kids? Or would we prefer to do something ourselves? Or would we prefer to like pass that wealth on to kids while you're alive and you can see it and
Mhm.
watch it, right? And
Mhm.
so helping people be conscious of what they're capable of financially is so important, and probably one of the central things that we do for people.
And we should mention that one of the things that you mentioned before, Brandon, is that the number that everyone should know, like basically off the top of their head, is is what is their net worth?
Yeah. 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 And the net worth is an incredible starting point and a really good thing to track, because that will show us how much we're growing things.
Mm-hmm.
But then beyond that, we've got to figure out, all right, what does that net worth do for us? Is our net worth, are all the different aspects of our net worth working efficiently? And are they working towards the goal that we have of whatever that goal is?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, net worth's important.
You talked, Rex talked a little bit about tracking and following up, but I know Baxter with Ameriprise has some great tracking software that clients can use. Is that where you suggest most people just go, Rex, is to sort of upload everything to that type of account?
Well, I think it depends on what you're tracking, right? As far as the net worth, absolutely, I think that's great, right? We do have great software and great technology and things like that as far as tracking net worth and things like that. If you're tracking like budget, there's a lot of budget software out there that people can use if you're tracking your spending, your monthly spending, to kind of see where things are getting away from you, or trying to stay within certain parameters. It depends on what you're trying to track as
Mm-hmm.
far as the best avenue to do that. So a lot of people still use spreadsheets, and some people still use pen and paper, right? So it just kind of depends on you and what's going to work for you.
Okay. Brandon?
I know a lot of people that, and you see it all the time, where they're making fantastic income, cash flows flying, they're seeing the numbers, they like the numbers, they're saving into retirement, they're maxing out their 401ks, right? They're doing all the important things, but it just feels hectic. It just feels chaotic. And those people typically are smart enough to know it's not as efficient as it should be. And so that's another one that we get a lot of, right? Is people come in and just like, hey, I'm making great money. I've got savings that are building up in this account, and I don't know that I'm getting the best savings rate on that. I don't know that I'm doing all the tax efficient things to get myself ready for retirement. And I'm saving a lot to retirement, but I don't know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And so speaking of goals, right, that's when they come in, we sit down, we figure out where they're at, and then we can we most of it, like I've said before, we make automatic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we set stuff up so it's automatically going to where it needs to go. But then the other stuff is setting those goals of, okay, where do we need to save? Where do we need to, and we just set that up so that they're ready to go, and so that we know that we're not missing any, big obvious pieces of their financial plan.
So every income level, Rex, needs a budget, correct?
Yes, I think so. I mean, within reason, right? I think budgets are tough. Budgets rarely work in reality. And so I think the more specific you can be on the budget, I think the better off you are, and the better you get at tracking where your spending is, the better off you are. But I think more important than the budget is making automatic the savings, and making the automatic the other areas of your life, because that's going to leave you with only the amount that you should be spending anyway. And so as long as you're not going over the top of that by using credit and stealing from the savings and things like that, then whether you end up spending, $500 dining out versus $500 at the grocery store, that's, as
Yeah.
far as from a financial standpoint, it's the same,
Right.
right?
So that's interesting. You said budgets don't work, but if you sort of reverse it, in other words, you have your spending that you have your bills that you have to pay each month, and then you have first you have how much you want to save, and then you have your bills, whatever that number is, and then it's after that you keep that's your spending or your fund money, and then you're saying like you don't have to budget that. That's just is what it is, right? Because you've already got
Yeah.
a certain amount going to savings, and your bills are paid.
I mean, I think it's good to track it and to pay attention, right? But I think you're going to spend X amount on gas, right? You're going to spend X amount on dining out and groceries and on, you know, whatever the odds and ends are that your life is involved in. And so as long as it stays within just the parameters of what's left in that after you've saved and after you've paid your bills, then it doesn't make a huge difference from a financial standpoint. Now, the habits that you're building can, because that creates lifestyle creep. That creates habits that you may not be willing to give up, or maybe harder to give up over time. And so I still think tracking the spending is helpful for people. But sometimes people try and do it the other way to where they're creating the budget. They're not making it automatic. So the paycheck comes in, they're like, okay, now the paycheck's here. And so now I have to, take an action to send the money to my savings, and I have to take an action to send my money somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And, and, and then I've only got $500 for dining out, and I've got 400 for groceries. And oh my gosh, I spent 600 dining out. And so now all of a sudden they've got this negativity on spending and on their budget and everything else. And it starts having negative repercussions on their financials as far as the way that they're viewing things. And they start getting negative on themselves. They start getting negative on their spending. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, I budgeted 500 to grocery stores. And even though I went over on dining, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And that's where they steal from their savings, because they still spend that much in other categories, because that's how much they budgeted for those other categories. Even though they went over in some, they're not intentionally going under in others.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I feel like people get in trouble a little bit.
Okay. Brandon, have you seen any apps that work for people that are trying to create budgets for themselves?
There are apps, account aggregators, right, that just put all of your stuff. And
I mean, my bank tells me where the spending goes, but I don't even look at that. So
right. And it depends.
I mean, I kind of know where it goes. So
right.
I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And they try and categorize it, and that works all right. I don't know. I laugh. We were using one once, and I got a notice on my phone. We were in college, like you just spent $30 on alcohol. I was like, I don't think we did, and turned out my wife had gone to Weinigers, and they just pulled the name out, and they're like, and so, I mean, I don't know. For us personally, my wife and I, what we do is we actually, at the end of each month, and sometimes we'll go a month or two, and she'll go back and redo it. But my wife will actually go through and budget out, and just on literally a piece of paper. I think I do it on Excel, but she loves paper. She writes it out on a paper and says all of the expenses that we had, and kind of categorizes those. So she'll break out gas, so we can kind of track that. That's a little bit more variable. She'll track going out to eat. She'll track, all the different things. And then we can see also our income. So we'll look at what our income was for the month, what our spending was for the month. And then I actually, on my own, I take an Excel spreadsheet, and I just I track our bank account levels, so I can see high water marks, low water marks, and I'll track that over time, and just kind of keep an eye on trends is what we're most interested in, right? If we spend a little bit more on one month and we dig into savings just a little, like that's going to happen, right? That's part of life. But I want to watch those high watermark trends. I want to watch the low watermark trends, and just see where everything is playing out. And that gives me incredible amounts of peace of mind, because the downside to having a good size emergency fund is that if you're not careful, that can drain down to zero, right? And you're like, what did I just do with all that money? And so the alternative is to either live paycheck to paycheck or track it and watch it, and I know a lot of people just track it on apps and look at it, and that's fine. But for me, it's just those high and low watermarks. I'd look at it and be like, I don't know, our bank accounts fluctuate by quite a bit intra-month, and that's normal and healthy. So I'd like to just kind of keep track of it that way. I don't have any apps that I use right now.
Okay. Very good. So that's essentially covers creating a budget. I mean, everyone's different, everyone's unique. And so, but breaking free, becoming financially independent, this is sort of, we just did a podcast about retirement, but it is possible to reach this financial independence before 60, before 65. You can reach it really at any age if you plan correctly, right? So, Rex, what type of moves, or how do you set goals to sort of become financially independent?
Well, I obviously financial independence can be different for everybody, right? And so for some people, it's going to be spending a smaller dollar amount versus a larger dollar amount. And so I think figuring that out for you first, as far as, am I comfortable living on $3,000 a month? Am I comfortable living on 5, 10, 25? What's the amount? And because then you can back into, how much you need to have from either different income sources or from assets in order to sustain that standard of living, which creates that financial independence. And so it doesn't necessarily, financial independence doesn't have to be just from savings and investments. It can be a combination of savings and investments with other income sources,
Right.
whether it be, rental properties, dividends from your investments, whether it be other businesses that you have an ownership interest in, things like that can kind of create that.
Okay.
The problem is spending money is just so much fun, right? The
Ah.
people that have an income to be able to like retire super early, like save a ton and then retire early. That when people have that income, they enjoy. They're like, wow, this traveling thing is kind of a lot of fun, right? Oh wow, it's nice to have a nicer car.
So
It's
is
not,
that more of an income? Okay, so before you retire or you're older, financially independent might mean, and Rex, I think, like you still have income coming in, like income streams coming in that aren't necessarily your savings, right, Rex?
Yeah, I think you can have other income streams coming in, not necessarily from having to show up to a 9 to 5 job,
Yeah,
right? But other business interests that are generating income streams for you,
right.
right?
Like Brandon saying, it's now, it's fun to spend the money, and so financially independent means you've got some sort of chunk of change that's feeding you, whether um, it's interest or dividends or something, or you own a percentage of a business that just pays you each month that you don't have to necessarily work for. And then, but you do have money coming in. It's not that you're just spending the money with no money coming in, right?
right, but and it's different for everyone. But what is the end goal? What is the end goal of all of this? In my mind, it's to maximize the utility of the money, right? It's to get the maximum enjoyment out of that, whatever that is, right? Whether that's charitable or kids or whatnot, but it's to, and for whatever reason, it's from my observation, what the way most people kind of maximize that is you get a good job that makes a good income, you enjoy that, and you actually enjoy life and live life while also saving enough so that your future is taken care of, so that when you're of age that you're not going to be able to work anymore, you can then transition that into retirement.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that the ideal life is to just sit on a beach and do nothing all day every day is like the pinnacle of human fulfillment. I think that's wrong. And I think recognizing and realizing that earlier helps, because then you can find a job and a career or a path that you can do that you find fulfillment in while also making money, which enables you to spend money today and save, but spend money today, enjoy the life that you have today, and then have that enjoyment set for retirement as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that most successful people follow that same trajectory.
Mm.
It's just baffling to me, like it used to be anyway, when I'd see these billionaires that I'm like, you've got so much money. And I'd always like do the math, like you could spend X amount per day, right? Like there's no way you're going to ever be able to spend this all,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Why are you still going into work? Why are you still pushing so hard? And for some of them, it might be goals, but I think a lot of people, it's fulfillment.
Yeah.
It's no longer monetary gain. It's other goals. It's fulfillment. It's these other outside tangible things. And I think that the sooner you can recognize that, and the sooner you can recognize that money isn't the end goal, but that fulfillment and being able to explore the world and explore like different avenues of life, that is the end goal.
Yeah.
I think it changes your focus.
Yeah.
I think some people get their fulfillment through the Scrooge tactics, right? And so they just want to they just want to see the the dollars grow. They just want to see the zeros continue to pile up and accumulate and continue to grow. And that is their fulfillment. That's what they get joy out of.
Mm.
And so I think everybody's a little bit different that way. And I think a lot of people get fulfillment through kids or vacations or spending and different things like that. And the, some of the things that reduce the financial stresses of life, and it may bring other stresses, but I think a lot of people get it that way. But I think that there is a certain amount of the population that truly gets fulfillment out of amassing dollars.
Mm.
And I don't think that's right or wrong. I just think that that's what some people are like, and that's what they want.
Yeah. We're talking financial goal setting here on Through the Pines podcast with planwithbaxter.com. Brandon, you have some more numbers?
You bet.
All right.
You bet. So we're going into an election year, and so obviously we're not going political on this. However, it's one of the illegal immigration is one topic that's talked about a lot. And I find it funny, neither side really likes to actually go into the actual numbers of it, right? It's always just politicized. And so I found these numbers. I think they're really interesting. They are what they are, but
These financial numbers?
so these are dollars spent, and actually First Trust put this together, and they broke it out, and it's just a great one. They broke it out between both federal and state and local spending, right? So you got those two groups, and then subcategories of education expenses, medical expenses, justice and enforcement, law enforcement expenses, welfare programs, and then they back out the tax receipts received from illegal aliens, right? Because we actually, even illegal aliens pay in taxes and stuff. And so in different forms, right? And we could go whole podcast on that. But federal spending in billions is $50.2 billion spent on illegal immigration.
Like a year or?
Yeah, annually. 2023 wow. Cost study. State and local spending is estimated to be $100.5 billion. So all in, about $150.7 billion net cost on illegal immigration. And again, not saying that's good or bad or morally just or unjust, but I think it's interesting to have that number in your head. 50 billion federal, 100 billion state. When you look at and compare that with the different budgets, right? It's not a small number, but it's not our biggest number either, and so just keeping that, as you look at budget spending and you listen to political parties, talk about this, it's interesting to look at what that number is.
Well, they're all here for the American dream, Rex. And once you get the American dream, you become wealthy. How do you set goals to, like you said, keep the wealth, grow the wealth, give some of the wealth away? Like, what are some of those goals look like?
That's a good question. I think, yeah. I like it when Brandon comes up with good questions to where I have to stall and pause for a second to kind of gather my thoughts. And then I have to sit there and say, no, wait, can you repeat your question again?
Yeah.
Really, it just depends.
It just depends.
Yeah, that's my go-to answer. Just really depends. And now I can't remember your question. So repeat your question, Brandon.
Okay. Oh gosh, that's so funny. You've made it. You're wealthy now. Okay. And so what are some of the goals that you need to have to grow that wealth, maybe give that wealth away, sustain that wealth? Like what, once you've acquired the wealth in your perception of it and what it means to you, what do your goals look like at that point?
So most people in that situation have a couple of different primary goals. One is kind of a target rate of return on their money that they're trying to achieve over time. And again, there's the three pillars of wealth that we talk about, right? You've got the financial markets, so they've got a target rate of return there. They might have real estate investments, and so they would have a target rate of return there, and then business interests that they may own, and they're looking at a target rate of return there. So they're trying to grow their money at a certain rate, and then typically they're setting, they kind of have targets on what they're trying to give into the communities, or their passions and interests to kind of help society and humanity. And so typically they've got some areas there that they're targeting. And then they also typically get more into setting other goals. And some of these are just interpersonal goals, such as I want to read X amount of books, or I have a goal to go and meet, a certain number of influential people. And to be able to have opportunities like that, or I may have I have a goal to create memorable experiences with those that are closest to me. And so they're not always going to be financial related, but lots of times it starts being financial related, and then it expands out into some of those other interpersonal areas.
Very good. Brandon?
Yeah, I think that's what's cool about this nation and the setup, right? Is that it you can do what you want, and what are your goals as you've, if you once you've made it and you've got all the wealth and you're like, I think you find something that you get excited about.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen times where perhaps it was motivated, their motivation was seeing that number grow, and then they pass away and then donate it to a charity, which it gets kind of mediocrely spent, or whatever. But man, like if you can like get a passion and a drive, and you have the assets behind it, and you can find what you care about, and you can make a major difference in this world. And I think that can drive just exponentially good things, right? Clearly, what you're doing, right? You've amassed wealth, you have focus, you know how to use goals, you know how to do all these things. And then if you can take that and look around the world and say, what can I do to make this place a better place? No matter where that is, charities, international, kids, whatever that is. I mean, that's where it gets exciting, because once you can set that, then we can help you. Then we can invest the money appropriately so that we can hit the distribution needs that you need, so that we can grow the stuff that we can, and we can align your investments with your goals. And then that just comes together really nicely.
Very good.
I think it's interesting that society is so good at putting labels on people, and people kind of falling into that, such as, oh, you're middle class, or you're lower class, or you're higher class, or you're the top 1%, or you're the top whatever. And I think that with those labels, people hear that enough that all of a sudden they start to kind of buy into this nonsense of, oh, society says that's too much work. I don't want to start a charity, or it's too much work to do this or that or the other. And I would say shake that off, right? If you're passionate about something, shake off all of society's, labels and preconceived ideas. And who says you can't do something? Nobody says you can't do something. Go do it. Go live your life. Go dream big. Go do what you're passionate about, and figure out a way to financially get there so that you can achieve those things in life. And that's what we're here to help you do, is let us help you, on the financial end, figure out what that is, but dream big. And let's make some changes in the world. Let's make some changes in your backyard and in your society, and whatever that is that you're passionate about. And so don't just sit there and close your mind off because society says that you should. We don't take that stance. We take the stance that we are big believers in figuring out, kind of digging down to your core values and what really is important to you, and trying to figure out how to maximize that for you and for your family, and for those that you want to support throughout life. So,
man, I'm motivated now. And I really wish that I had like a T Swift shake it off drop just ready to go. But I didn't.
A little Steph Curry shoulder bake, right? Something.
Or that. So, well, the last one is protecting your assets. Rex, have you seen clients become so protective of their assets that their assets begin to dwindle?
Yes.
Okay.
Lots of different ways, right? Sometimes people get so conservative and so protective that they're not, growing their money, not keeping up with inflation, and so inflation erodes it away. Or some people get so enamored with an individual asset or an individual company or something like that, to where they're so concentrated in it that if you've listened to any of our podcasts, you've heard me multiple times say that, one of the number one creators of wealth is concentration, and one of the number one destroyers of wealth is concentration. And so people, the longer you hold something that's been successful, the more you start to believe that it's infallible, that it can't crash, that it can't go to zero, that it can't go the other direction. And that's a mistake, right? That is a mistake that you need to be aware of, that just because something's been a certain way in the past, that does not predict the future. In investments, or in financial matters, any of those things. And so you need to be aware of that. But we absolutely have seen people get too conservative, or too protective, to where it starts to erode and destroy their wealth, because of that. And now on the flip side, you don't want to all of a sudden, put everything on red 23 either, right? Because you don't want to go all in and get too aggressive. So, yeah, because again, that can also destroy wealth, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
the key is balance. right? The key is diversification and balance, and taking calculated risks, and making sure that you're aware of the risk that you are taking with your financial assets.
So Brandon, what are ways that people can protect their assets but still grow those at the same time?
Yeah, calculated risk. I think Rex nailed it with that. It comes down to, um, what types of insurance do you have? I hear people sometimes will talk about like, oh, I've got this insurance policy in case, I have this $4,000 loss, whatever that may be, health, vehicles, whatever. And it's like, really? Like 4,000, like we can self-insure that, right? And the insurance company's in it for a profit. Do we really need to insure? Like we can take that risk.
Hmm.
On the other hand, there's some things that we can't take, right? I don't want to assume the risk that if my house burns down that I have to, right, or something major like that. And so you've got to calculate the risk. On the other hand, with investments, you see people, especially if you're young, right, and you're just nervous, and so you want to be way too conservative. What are you nervous about? And understanding what is that risk. If we're well diversified, are we really worried about the stock market going way to zero and never coming back? It's I'm not saying it's impossible, but it surely, as you vet that out, it's a somewhat of an irrational fear in a lot of ways when you look at the odds of that happening.
Well, there's something else going on that you might need to be worried about if that happens.
Yeah, right. Then that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Right. Like if the stock market crashes and no companies in the United States can make any money, and they all close their doors for business, say, yeah, we're worthless now. Like if every company in the United States closes, we got other issues, and it really doesn't matter whether we were in bonds or stocks so much, and so I'm not saying to take risk that you're uncomfortable with, but I am saying get to understand what you are afraid of so that we can vet out whether that's a rational fear and move on. Because if you're scared of losing 20% in the stock market, and so you get really, really conservative while you're young, like what if you just leave it, let it grow? You can outgrow what you're scared of, so that even if there is a major downturn, it's still way beyond where it would have been, beforehand. And I see that. I had one client, come to me and say, hey, and this was years ago, but she said, hey, I got really lucky. I pulled all this money out right before the stock market crashed in 2008. And I'm so glad I did. It was just one of the best moves I've made, financially. And this was well beyond 2008. And I had to say to her, well, I wish you wouldn't have. I wish you would have left it in and seen it crash, because you would have almost double as much money as you would have had, had you just had you left it in. Like, sure, we saved on the downside, but we missed so much upside. And so, making sure that we understand what our fear is, and vetting that out, whether that's a rational fear or whether we should be accepting that.
I love it. Rex, anything else on financial goal setting for the new year?
I think the two key takeaways probably are one, figure out where you're at, as Brandon mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, so that you know your starting point. And then I think next is be smarter, to steal the acronym out there about your goals, right? So specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound, and then be the ER about it, smarter, evaluate and readjust as you
I
need.
just imagined Rex like sleeping, and then he's just talking about smarter goal.
I can do that.
You should see me just sleep talking. Make it achievable.
Oh, I love it so much. So thanks so much. Go Brandon. There's Brandon and Rex for being on this podcast of Through the Pines. If you like this podcast, you can consider supporting us at buymeacoffee.com. Also, please visit planwithbaxter.com, and then you can chat with these fine gentlemen all you want. You can follow us on our socials, Facebook at Pines Podcast, and Instagram at Pines, I think Pines_podcast, and on YouTube at Through the Pines Podcast on YouTube, where you can see our wonderful, beautiful faces. That's it for this episode of Through the Pines, reminding you to use yesterday's dollars to finance tomorrow's dreams.